else that works here know, and we'll be more than happy to help you out. Before we start the film, I am going to pass the mic off to John Siddig with Cinerama.
Thank you. And I'll welcome you to the Cinerama Dome also. How the West Was Won had its world premiere, of all places, in London on November 7th of 1962. And it opened in Japan, Australia, and 9 other countries before it came to America. The film opened on February 20th at the Warner Hollywood Theater, which is 2 blocks behind us. This was the last of the 3-strip Cinerama films. The other film that they made concurrently was The Wonderful World of the Brothers Grimm, and that opened in America first, and then we switched places with the other countries. During the production of How the West Was Won and Brothers Grimm, it became very apparent that the Cinerama process was great for shooting travelogues, a mountain, a canal, those kind of things. But it was very difficult to shoot a narrative film. You could not do process photography in Cinerama. So you're going to see a degradation of the quality of the film when they go down the river on the raft, and it was shot up against a green screen in 70 millimeter and then reprinted onto 3 strips of Cinerama, and it isn't quite the same. You could not do a close-up in Cinerama because it had 3 lenses. If you got too close to the camera, you'd have 3 heads, one on each panel. And there are a couple of shots in there, like where James Stewart the horse is a little bit too close, and as it turns its head, it gets an extra ear. The other thing was that actors were very intimidated because if they wanted to shoot a waist-up shot, which is as close as they could get without having 3 heads, the camera was 18 inches from their face because all the lenses were 28 millimeter lenses. Yet there's the high cost of multiple takes because you're using 3 times as much film. And actors were intimidated because of the fact that the camera was in one place, but the lenses were shooting 3 different ways. If I was talking to the audience in Cinerama, I'd be talking to you like this, but when I came up on the screen, I'd be looking at you. And so it was very hard for actors. The original budget on this film was $9 million. It ballooned to $12 million, and then director Henry Hathaway said we need another sequence, and that was the Outlaws sequence. And so it came up to $15 million, the most expensive Western ever made up to that time. The film had an all-star cast, and part of that was due to actress Irene Dunne, who was on the board of the St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica. MGM was not in the healthiest place. They just put out Mutant on the Bounty, and it was not a success. And so Irene Dunne came to MGM and said, give me a list of the stars that you want. And they gave her a list of like 25 stars. And she said, if I sign 12 of them at a reduced rate, I want part of the profits of this film to go to St. John's Hospital. And so she signed the 12 big stars in this film. They worked for as little as $5,000 a week, far below their asking price. And to this day, and some of the money that you used at the box office today is going to go to St. John's. It's still in effect. And to date, they've made up $4 million. Stuntman Bob Morgan in the Outlaw sequence, he's doubling for George Papard, and he's on a flatbed train car with logs that are moving around. there was a tragic accident during this time, because another one of the things with Cinerama, because the panorama was so big, a lot of the usual things that you could use for safety on stunts was not available. Bob Morgan fell between the cars on the track and was run over. And it took him 5 years to recuperate to the point where he was able to walk again. Lorne James, who was also a stuntman, and he does the stunts for Debbie Reynolds in this film. So during the Indian attack, and Debbie falls off of the wagon, when she goes to get picked up by Robert Preston and jumps up onto Robert Preston's horse, notice how bulky Debbie Reynolds has become, because that's Lorne James. And Lorne James did a famous stunt in this film where he's an outlaw, and he's on the top of a caboose, and he gets shot, he falls off, grabs onto a cactus, and rides the cactus down to the ground. When they had the premiere in Paris at the Empire Theater, and Lorne was there, the audience gave him a standing ovation during the film for that stunt. There were over 12,000 extras in this film, including several Indian tribes. There are no computer-generated people in this film. You'll also see clips from a couple other films. The opening scenes and the end scenes of modern day West are from This Is Cinerama. The Mexican army walking across Texas is from John Wayne's The Alamo. And some of the Civil War scenes are from MGM's Raintree County. Now there's also some strange casting in this film. Carol Baker plays George Peppard's mother. In fact, George Peppard was 2 years older than Carol Baker when they played in this. Gary Cooper was going to take the James Stewart role, but he backed out. And James Stewart always thought that he was badly cast in this. He was supposed to be 28 years old and wooing Carol Baker, but he was actually 52 at the time. And everybody's favorite president, Abraham Lincoln, Raymond Massey, also plays Abraham Lincoln in this film, as he had done on television and Abe Lincoln in Illinois. Hope Lange was in this film until it got to the final cutting, and her entire performance was left on the floor. Hell West Was Won was the second highest grossing film of 1963, second only to 20th Century Fox's Cleopatra. It took several years for it to turn a profit, but it finally did. Now tonight, I'm sure everybody knows, and that's the reason you're here, we are showing this in the original 3-strip Cinerama process. Now back in 1963, it took 5 projectionists to run a Cinerama film. Now a lot has happened since then. We put a man on the moon, and more than likely, the cell phone in your pocket has more computer power than they had back in 1969. So tons of innovations have happened since then. So tonight, it's only going to take 5 projectionists to run this film. And if you turn around and look, up here running the A projector is Dave Strohmeyer. Running the B projector is Jose Rodriguez. Running the C projector over here is Adam Sittig. And the sound governor that you can't see is Alan Hollis. And I will be the picture control engineer. There is an intermission required in this film to change reels and so forth, and it takes us a good 15 minutes to do that and go through and check everybody else's work. Because once you push the start button, if something's wrong, it's going to be very evident on the screen. It's now my privilege to introduce one of the people that was in this film. He's slightly older than he was back in 1963, but he's got a couple stories to tell about how the West was won. Stanley Livingston.
How many people have seen this film before? All right, got some return people here. Yeah, well, when I worked on the movie in 1962, I was actually 11 years old, which makes me about, almost 70. Working on the film was pretty exciting. I was doing My Three Sons, and I guess that's how most of you know me. On our off time, I got hired by Henry Hathaway to play George Papard's son. And what I didn't know was anything about Henry Hathaway, the director, who was a really tough guy, tough hombre. And I was used to working with TV directors who were pretty easygoing, and they would, codule you along and be nice to you. Henry wasn't anything like that. Henry was, listen, you little SOB, stand over there and don't move, and I'll tell you when to move and do this and do that. And it wasn't just me. I think he had the entire cast shivering in their shoes, even the crew. But there was a particular moment where you're kind of happy when things would go wrong, and it felt like you could kind of get even with Henry. And there was one guy who he just berated and was riding on him all day long. Anyway, there's a scene in the movie, which you'll recognize. It's George Papard, myself, a little kid who played my younger brother, and Eli Wallach and his band of bad guys ride up. And they have a discussion there, and Eli Wallach threatens him. But at the last moment, Henry decided to add some atmosphere into the shot. And there was a guy that was doing the special effect. And what he wanted was some smoke to be coming out of this well, or this mine shaft that was right in the background of the scene. And this poor guy, we must have shot it 2 or 3 times, and the smoke was kind of thin. And he kept going over, looking down, you SOB, get that smoke going, and I just want to see smoke. And finally, this guy, I guess, just decided he'd had enough of Henry Hathaway, and he yelled for roll camera, action, smoke, and this guy, instead of putting a couple drops in, poured the entire bottle of liquid smoke in, and all of a sudden, it just started billowing up, and I would say for a good 10 minutes, you couldn't tell if it was night or day. I'm standing next to George Papard. I couldn't even see him. And so naturally, everybody started laughing. And, it was kind of funny to see Henry hoisted on his own petard. But the best part was it was his voice that came out of the hole in the ground with the smoke. They yelled out, "Anytime you're ready, Mr. Hathaway." Anyway. That's one of my magic moments in the film. It was great working on it, great working with Debbie Reynolds, and interesting enough too, while we were doing that movie, my brother was doing a film with Debbie Reynolds called My Six Loves, and she would shoot How the West Was Won during the weekdays, and then off to Paramount Studios on the weekend, and work with my brother Barry, who, as you may remember, was Ernie on My Three Sons. So we both worked with her at the same time. Anyway, she was a great person to work with, and she really took a liking to us, and it's always nice because when you're doing a film, a lot of times the actors you're working with that are playing your parents, you never even get to meet them until the first scene, and all of a sudden you're doing scenes with them or crying them on their laps or something. But she went out of her way to make us feel like her own kids, and just a very memorable experience. Anyway, thank you, and I'm going to pass this over. Back to John.
Just one question. How many of you came from out of state today to see this? Thank you. Anybody from out of the country? I know there's one person. Oh yeah, okay, there you are. Okay. Well, thank you very much. One last thing before we start. We have another special guest here, Todd Fisher. Todd is the son of Debbie Reynolds and the brother of Carrie Fisher, and he's brought some home movies to show while they were making How the West Was Won. Todd Fisher.
Thank you. I don't know if you noticed when you came in the lobby, there were some costumes and a poster there. And that's my mother's one sheet of How the West Was Won that came from her collection. And those two costumes are hers from the movie. And I strung together some clips of some are home movies and some are still pictures behind the scenes. This is a scene that we shot actually in Debbie's Meadow, where the scene with Robert Preston proposing to my mother. And I went back to that exact same spot where my sister and I had been on the set. And in a second, you'll see me going from this to the home movies. And it was a remarkable moment because as I arrived on this scene, my mother was very ill at the time. My phone rang, and it was her on the phone. And it's not easy to get to this place, so it's a very unusual piece of timing. That's us on that set in that same meadow, which eventually Henry Hathaway used for True Grit. And you know what's cool is my mother, unlike a lot of movie star parents, brought my sister and I on the set with her, not just to be mom, but also because she was the kind of person who wanted us to be with her, but also experiencing the things she was experiencing. So needless to say, being on that set was a real privilege. And so that day when I revisited that location, I said to her, thank you for bringing Carrie and I here. Carrie was with me at that time. We were up at the Telluride Film Festival. And there's Carrie. That's Princess Leia, you see? Who would have known? Now there's the costume that's in the lobby. And this really freaked Carrie and I out. Because one minute our mother was like in her 30s, and the next minute she's like 70 years old. Carrie started to cry. Now you can see she got the joke eventually. But that is kind of weird. One minute your mom's 35, and the next minute she's 70. But that very costume's there. This is a different set, but that was my point. She would drag us around, and I say that in a good sense of the word. And it was a privilege to be able to experience the things. Henry Hathaway, at the time, you'll see a great picture of the two of them. He was mentioning that Henry was a bit of a tyrant, but you'll see my mother got the best of him as well. She just teased him. And of course, it's hard to intimidate the unsinkable Molly Brown, if you know what I mean. So you'll see. That's my grandmother, by the way, my great-grandmother. That's Lauren, the stuntman they were just talking about, who was my mother's double. And he taught Carrie and I to ride before we could see straight. And but Lauren, you'll see on the river rafting scene, he was mentioning a couple of different scenes where Lauren is doubling my mom. There it is. And you'll see these arms are these big hairy arms. But that's supposed to be my mother there. There's the girls with Henry. They were pretty spectacularly cute girls, weren't they? You'll see the camera. That's the sound blimp. When you put the camera in the blimp, this gives you some idea of the size of this camera. This is them rehearsing, and there's Papard over here. Some of these scenes and these stills were collected by my mother. There you go. There's Henry. You can see that she's not taking it too seriously there. He did have everybody scared to death. But, you know, Molly Brown, like I say, there's the camera there in the blimp. And as I said, you were not allowed to look at the actor when you would do a scene, and that can be very challenging for an actor to have to look off axis so that it didn't look. There you go. There's some of the behind-the-scenes stuff. So I also brought with me her script. This is her actual script, and there are pictures in here, but there's also a lot of pages in here that didn't make it in the movie, and a lot of pages in here that were added. When in the movie business, you put colored pages in every time there's a change that's made, and this thing is very colorful script. My mother was asked to continue working on this movie. Henry Hathaway thought that she was pretty amusing, and so they were shot for almost 2 years on this production. So they really couldn't afford to pay her, as he pointed out. So they built her a projection room in trade, the studio, MGM. That was Jimmy Stewart, that picture of him. He always, every time he saw my mom, right up to the end of his life, he said, "Oh, Debbie, sing me that little song." and she would sing "Away, Away, Come Away with Me." And you'll see all of that stuff in a few minutes here. I hope you have a great time. I have a thank you for coming, and thank you for Turner Classic Movies for promoting this thing. And thank you, ArcLight, for preserving this freaking theater, because in this city, we're grateful to have anything that survives. We've torn everything down. Enjoy the movie.